I was kind of listening to some stuff on YouTube that you had out today, and some of the stuff I read in your first book and a half. I haven't got to the other four, or the other, the third and the fourth one. But one of the things I was interested in was basically stuff from like Focus 23 to 27, the belief systems area. And you were talking about on this YouTube thing that everybody kind of had their, depending on their belief system, is kind of where they get stuck, how strong it is. They can have, they'll believe in a certain type of hell, like you had the thief hell, or you had, whatever Christian religion is, that's where you kind of go with like people.
Yeah, and I should say that map that describes those areas, that map comes from Monroe's original explorations.
Well, I knew it did. Those are arbitrary numbers between 23 and 27.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now, is that kind of your experience too? Is that depending on your beliefs, be it religious or philosophical or whatever else, if they're strong enough, that's kind of where you're going to be stuck at unless you get some kind of support or help to get through there?
That's a good question, and it's just it's one that a lot of people worry about, not just in the belief system territories, but in the area that Monroe called Focus 23, which is a place where people are kind of stuck for other reasons. And I would say that as far as the belief system territories go, not everybody of a given religion will necessarily go to one of those belief system territories. Sure. In my view, a normal death happens like what happened with both my parents. I mean, I was there when Mom died, I was there when Dad died. A normal belief goes like this. A normal death goes like this. Mom's vital signs and all her monitors go flat. Bruce sort of gets down on one knee to say, Mom, I'm glad I made it in time for you before you left. And as I'm sitting there or standing there or kneeled there, I get the perception that she comes up out of her body and she moves down to the foot of her bed, standing next to her mother, who died several years before. And we say our goodbyes for now. Okay, I'll be talking to you soon, Mom. Good, so long. And then her mother guides her to where she needs to go. It was the same when my father died. When my father died, it was my mother, his wife who died before him, who met him when he died, along with his sister who had been murdered as a 16-year-old in the 1930s. The two of them came, and when Dad died and came out of his body, they took him where he was to go. Now, for me, in a normal death, that's how it goes. Now, sometimes, a friend of mine named Jim was raised as a kind of a holy roller in his religion. And after Jim died, I went to find him to check on him. And when I went looking for him, I bumped into his wife, Alyssa, who had died several years earlier. And, hi, Alyssa, how's it going? And she said, Bruce, he's gone into this place, and I've been in there a couple of times trying to get him to come out, but he won't come out. And I said, well, okay, I'll go check on him. Well, he had gone into a belief system territory that was the heaven that he had been taught existed in the religion of his youth. And so I went in and found Jim, and he looked good. And throughout our relationship, Jim always looked at me as somewhat of a heretic, someone that probably would have had wood piled around his feet at some point with people lighting the wood on fire, just for the kinds of things Bruce talked about. And more than once told me that, you're not a bad guy, it seems like, Bruce, but you're in league with Satan. That was kind of Jim's. Anyway, so I encountered Jim in his belief system territory, heaven. And, hi, Jim, how's it going? And he said, well, it's going pretty good, just like I expected. I'm here in heaven. And I said, well, this might be a really nice place, and there might be some other places you might like to visit just to see what that's like. Take a little tour. And Jim said, well, why would I want to do that? I'm in heaven. I said, well, maybe your heaven isn't exactly like you thought. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, for example, Jim, you always told me that I was working with Satan. And he said, yeah, I believe you are. And I said, well, Jim, in your religion, it preaches that Satan cannot get into heaven, right? And he said, well, that's right. I said, Jim, if I'm working with Satan, how is it that you and I are having this conversation? That was almost enough to put a little crack in his belief system, in which Alyssa could have come in and brought him out. Not enough. And so just left him there. So, yeah, there are some places called belief system territory, heavens and hells and others. And some people, by virtue of the strength of their beliefs, are attracted into those places. And they essentially seem to stay there until something causes them to doubt the beliefs that the place is constructed around. And once they begin to doubt something about the heaven that they're in, that can become a little opening for someone who might come in and say, how'd you like to take a tour of some other place to just see what it's like? You kind of like going to Paris instead of being stuck in Denver.
So we're kind of determined, what kind of experiences we could have when we believe too strong. I guess that's why William Buhlman always says, tries to have the affirmation of higher self now to get beyond it, go to your highest self, not just what you've been taught as a kid or whatever else, to expand beyond the beliefs and dogmas that we have here.
I got the last half of what you said. The first half of what you said, I didn't get so well. So could you come at that again?
Well, some of the stuff that I've been studying from William Buhlman, the out-of-body guy,
yeah,
he has affirmations that he's saying that we should try to go to our highest self upon death, and at that point in time, so that we don't necessarily get kind of stuck in some of this lower level, if you want to call it a lower level type belief systems, which that's what I would try to do. But at the same token, I kind of get the feeling that people are going to end up where whatever their belief is, if they believe in a hell or a heaven or Santa Claus or whatever, that's going to be kind of where they're going to end up unless they can find some way to get out.
And in my view, on a normal death, that won't happen. Yeah. So Buhlman talks about that you should intend to go to your higher self at death.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that sounds like a pretty decent plan. I would say it's not the only plan I would choose, but it sounds like a pretty decent plan.
I'm not reading just one person. I'm so fascinated by this stuff. I'm interested in your books and interested in Rowe's books and interested in Buhlman's books. And as an engineer, I try to study it all.
Yeah. People tend to worry about getting stuck. And I see it when I teach workshops, because they're saying, oh my gosh, what happens if I get stuck when I die? Or maybe my grandma got stuck. The reason I focus on people being stuck is because I teach retrieval, just as the Monroe Institute does. Different form. I don't use the hemisync stuff, but I teach retrieval. So we're naturally focused on people who have gotten stuck. But there's really nobody that I know that has any idea how many people are stuck, or even what percentage it is. It might be some tiny, minuscule amount. Who knows?
No, I'm not really worried about being stuck. I like to think that I'm open-minded enough to not get hung up there. But it's kind of fascinating because when you talked about the Oklahoma City bombing,
Yeah.
people that apparently were stuck down there,
Yep.
bombing that you had to go and retrieve at the start. Of course, then you went through stuff, seeing it not there, and those types of things. You know, I don't know how people, unless they just obviously aren't expecting to be in that situation, maybe get stuck. I don't know.
Well, one of the things that happens, the way a person dies can have an effect on what happens. If a death is sudden and unexpected, it's pretty easy to sort of miss it, to not realize it happened.
I want to constantly go into death, you know, eyes wide open.
And since to themselves they appear to still be in a body, they appear to still be dressed, they still be who they were. Now I'm getting a whole lot of my own voice from
Yeah,
your
our
mouth.
speakers messed it up here too. Yeah, that's better.
That's better. So since people essentially missed the fact that they died, it's easy for them to believe, like the woman who is trapped under a bunch of rubble, it's easier for her to believe that she can't get out. She thinks she's still physically alive. In a workshop in New Hampshire years ago, a participant encountered a woman who was waiting for a bus at a bus stop. And the story that unfolded was that the woman who was waiting for the bus had been standing with her back to traffic, talking to someone, not realizing she was standing right on the edge of the curb. And when she sort of absent-mindedly stepped back to say something, bang, she was hit by a car, her body was thrown through the air, and she was dead like that. She just jumped back up off the pavement, kind of looked down, looked like she was okay. She walked back up on the sidewalk. She noticed all the rest of the people were like, ah! Looking down the road. She didn't know what they were so concerned about, and she was trying to ask people, what's going on? What's going on? Why are you, what happened? And she said, they just ignored me. They wouldn't say a thing to me. It was like they didn't even know I was there. Well, they didn't. Her physical body went flying through the air. Her non-physical body was, to her, still her, and the death happened so quickly that she didn't realize she died. She just figured for some reason, people in this town just don't want to talk to me anymore. And she had been at that bus stop waiting since somewhere in the 1930s. And the person who did that retrieval had the bus company name taken from the hat that a helper came in. The helper shows up, he's dressed up in a bus company uniform, it's got his name on it, the bus company's name on it. He says, I'm really sorry, lady, the bus broke down and they've sent me with a car to take you anywhere you want to go, please come with me. This helper, this guide, just sort of escorted her out and retrieved her. Until that point, well, until just a little later, she still thought she was physically alive. It wasn't until the guy who was driving the car is driving along and the participant pretends she's sitting in the back seat, so she's watching all this, and the driver turns his head to the woman and he starts talking to her, and while he's holding her attention, the scene changes. They're no longer driving on a street in the city, they're now driving across an open field. And there are two people way up ahead standing in the field. And as the car approaches the two people, the driver points to them and says, excuse me, ma'am, do you know these people? It was the dead woman's grandparents. When she got out of the car and reunited with her grandparents, that was the first she realized she died. So sometimes the cause of death, the manner of death, can cause us to sort of miss it.
Yeah, well, I don't want to do that. I want to go to death wide-eyed and aware of everything.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gordon. I wanted to ask the members here. We have some new members here this evening, and do you guys know what he means when he's talking about soul retrieval? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you knew. I didn't want you to be missing missing anything. All this good stuff here. That's a lot like the Patrick sessions, and we listened to that at one of our meetings too, where Patrick was floating in the ocean for all those years, 100 years or something, and didn't know he was dead.
I did.
Yeah, we did it here.
Yeah, when I went to that first Lifeline program, we listened to the Patrick tape.
Yeah.
And that's one that, well, I was still in my probably early 40s and really didn't have much of a heart at that point. But it was one that I could see, if that's real, there are potentially a lot of people who are unnecessarily suffering just because they don't know that they have died and don't know there's somewhere else they can be. And if I can learn a way to make contact with them and help them go to a better place, this is a good thing, Bruce. Do this. Yeah, and so retrieval became something that I did, well, my wife would say obsessively. I would say I was very persistent. But it's something that I began to do often. And when I developed my own way of teaching exploration of non-physical realities and opening and expanding consciousness and awareness, retrieval seemed like a good vehicle to use. And so I've used that vehicle as a way of teaching.
Is it mainly adults, or do children sometimes need to be retrieved?
I think you said is it mainly adults?
Yeah, do children ever need to be retrieved?
Well, there have been some child retrievals. I'll give an example or two, but typically the earlier in a person's life they died, the less possibility there is for getting stuck. Because getting stuck is typically about physical world human habits or physical world human beliefs. But an example, I did a 2-hour version of the workshop in Australia years ago, and a woman who described her experience said that she found herself in a hospital room, and there was a little boy who was sitting up on a hospital bed, and she realized this is who she was to retrieve. The little boy appeared to be not 10 or 11. He was a little younger than that. And the story that came out as she interacted with him and communicating with him, the story that came out was the little boy basically said, I got sick. And I got so sick I couldn't go outside and play anymore. He said I got sicker and I couldn't even have my mates in to play in the house anymore. And I got sicker and I couldn't go to school anymore, and I got sicker and they put me here in the hospital. And every time Mom and Dad visited, Mom especially would say, Jamie, don't leave. Stay here, Jamie. Don't leave me. Stay here, Jamie. And then at some point, the little boy said, Mom and Dad and the doctor were here in the room, and Mom and Dad were crying, and they switched off all the machines the participant could see. Switched off all the machines, they pulled the curtain, and they left. And I've been waiting here for Mom to come back, and she hasn't come back. And I'm still waiting, just like she told me to. That little boy was stuck. in that hospital bed because when Mom said, Jamie, don't leave, he didn't. The participant also said, at that point, this guy walks into the scene as a clown. She said he's got a big red nose, orange hair, all kinds of makeup, big boots, polka dot pants. This is a clown. She said, I thought this kid would be happy to see the clown. Turned out he wasn't. He was terrified of the clown. And as the clown approached him, the little boy just kind of got more terrified and backed up until the clown bent over and tipped his hat, and there was a baby chick walking around on the top of the clown's head. And at that point, the little boy got curious, and the clown, who was a helper, asked the little boy if he'd like to take a walk. And so they walked down and got into an elevator. The participant followed him in. And she said she expected the elevator to go up to take the boy to heaven, but it went down. And she thought, oh my God, what does this mean? He's going down in the elevator. And when the door opened up, she said it was a big open field. There were dogs and cats and goats and rabbits and all kinds of little animals running around and kids playing. And his little dog walked up to the elevator, and she said the little boy seemed to know the dog, and the dog seemed to know the little boy, and he just took off playing with the little dog. Children don't typically get stuck, but sometimes, most retrievals are of adults. In my experience and the experience of people who learn how to do retrievals, most appear to be adults.